since the Court of Appeal had correctly held that the appeal before it was an incompetent appeal that was a complete abuse of process, there was nothing again pending before the Court of Appeal to which it can engraft an order of status quo ante bellum.
Well, for their assessment, I'm joined now by our guest analysts, and they are the political and current affairs commentator and professor of communications at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, the policy strategist and group CEO of the global investment and trade company, Baba Yusuf, and the public affairs analyst, Mazi Nnamdi Dixon-Irebu, who is both a member of the ADC and an obedient, and was, until recently, a member of the PDP. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. And let me start with you, Mazi Nnamdi Dixon-Irebu, because, as we said, you were a member of the PDP until recently. You're in the ADC, so your reaction would be worth having. I mean, a lot of people would have got excited listening to Bolaji Abdullahi, but then listening to the lawyer, the lawyer who spoke last, I mean, he kind of took the wind out of the sails there by sort of dampening down the mood. What is your reaction to all of that, as both a member of the ADC and a former member of the PDP, about today's proceedings, basically?
Thank you, Charles. And I was in court, so it's not just from the report that you just gave now. Yes, I was a member of the PDP and would have stayed in PDP if not that I am seeking to represent my people in the Green Chamber. So getting back home and, of course, realizing that all of this crisis may possibly not give us a platform to express our interests, and my people had to urge me to move on, and that's what we did, and got into the ADC. And, of course, yeah, it has its own crisis, which we have seen today that is being fueled from the camps of the ruling party, because the facts are there, where the chief of staff to the president will say, go in there and scatter them and all of that. So the crisis faced by ADC, as we saw the Supreme Court rule today, clearly has at least given some sense of balance back to the leadership of the party, because what INEC did was wrong. Interpreting whatever he did about status quo ante bellum and all that, removing the names of the leadership of the party, I think it was wrong, and the Supreme Court corrected that today. That doesn't mean that the crisis in the party is over, but at least there's a leadership recognized by law. We will now navigate all other issues as we move on. Then that of the PDP, as it played out today in court, yes, the Ibadan convention was nullified. Also, just like it did at the appellate court, the suspension of Od Anyanwu, the former national secretary, and the former national legal advisor of the party, and two others, were also the suspension on the 1st of November 2025 was upheld also by the Supreme Court, meaning there's a vacuum. So the aspect of the Turaki end, not recognized and all of that, there can be a vacuum, because the Constitution covers up for a possible scenario as we have today. So the BOT will naturally take charge of the party, possibly convene a NEC and set up a caretaker committee. That's what was expected of the PDP. But I expect that the ADC, where I belong, will now do everything possible to correct whatever internal documentations that ought to have been done that they didn't do right. So it gives hope that there's a possibility that the desire of the president to have himself coronated as president may not necessarily be what will happen in 2027. That will be a contest.
Let me come to you, Professor Adeniyi. What's your reaction to today's judgment?
I think it's been well said, first by your guests, the chieftain of the ADC that spoke from Kaduna. He spoke very well, balanced, just like the Supreme Court judgment apparently is. And of course, Mazi has alluded to it as well. He also spoke in a very objective way, of course, maybe onto the very last sentence, which can be slightly controversial. But you see, I also believe that ADC will have to, they still have a lot of work to do, particularly because the case is going back to the lower court, and that is more than enough to create some anxiety, for the party. It's a potentially great party. It has robust membership, and that with that kind of membership and the potentials they have, they need to be running on a very stable ground, without fear of any further interference, from a third party represented definitely in the judiciary.
Right. Thank you for keeping it nice and brief. And let me come to you, Baba Yusuf. Let me go to the ADC, because a lot of people are focused on the ADC at the moment. The Supreme Court voiding the status quo antebellum order, effectively restoring the David Mark-led leadership. Does that settle anything, or does it just pause the conflict?
I think it just, I don't know, it's a catch 66 or 22 for ADC, Charles. Because yes, now the recognition of the David Mark leadership, if anything, in my view, has put, with profound respect to the chairman of INEC, in his place.
That's it.
That being said, that is settled. However, it is not yet Uhuru for ADC.
Yeah.
Remember, yesterday, very tactical move by the establishment. Justice Joyce Abdul Malik barred the leadership of David Mark from interfering with state congresses. Before that, restrained INEC from participating or recognizing all the congresses that have taken place before now, until the final determination of the case, which all we know is only God knows how long. So what I'm saying is, the game is still on. Don't forget, we have about 1 month for the primaries, for the timeline of the INEC timetable to kick off. So the subterfuge is on. And I hope and I pray, like I've been consistently saying, the ADC leadership will not fail the tens of millions of their supporters by falling their hand, like they say in the streets of Nigeria, by not doing the needful to address the lingering internal democracy issue, which has been a critical failure factor of all the opposition political parties. Why we are here is because when they took over, they were not able to do, first of all, the proper risk assessment to even know whether ADC is the party they should go into. In my opinion, that party was on no-go area having issue. Having done that, not to take the strategic moves of doing the sharing formula such that the legacy members of ADC wouldn't have felt aggrieved to become now the Trojan horse strategy for the establishment. So it's game on. But having said that, like I said, the chairman of the INEC now will sit tight with this and do what he's supposed to do as a moderator of our elections in Nigeria, and try not to destroy all that he has built as a reputable academician and as a reputable lawyer in this country, because today the highest court of the land has told him this is what should be.
Right. Thank you for that. Mazi Dixon Irebu, let's step back for a moment and you help us look at the opposition as a whole. Between the PDP's crisis, the ADC's legal battles, is the opposition weakening itself ahead of 2027? I mean, never mind all the stuff about whether there's intervention or not intervention. I'm just looking at the opposition as a whole, with you being somebody who presents themselves as a central member of that opposition.
Opposition is not weakening itself. Even though the opposition hasn't shown the Nigerian electorate that they are ready to sack the current government. Because by now, one expected that the opposition would have formed some kind of alliance to take a consensus position on who we're going to present for the election. That is where I have my reservation about what is happening in the opposition, because I am disappointed that up till now we are...
Yeah, perhaps we shouldn't be calling them the opposition, because there are several oppositions.
Yeah,
I mean, we can't talk of them as a unified...
I use the opposition deliberately because all of us are involved in it. All Nigerians, whether you're a member of any political party or not, as long as you're in this country where there is no direction from the current administration, You are in the opposition. We don't have light. The economy is bad. The insecurity is terrible and all of that. So we ought to be gathering to ensure that we save ourselves. We're all endangered.
Yeah,
it's
but
not just political
Nigerians
parties.
aren't necessarily convinced. I mean, they may agree that there are problems, but they're not necessarily convinced that you're the solution.
Where they are not convinced now at the moment is because we have not seen that candidate they want to that we want to present for the contest. And that is why, even while in the PDP, I was always about shouting here and there, saying to the ADC, should they succeed in weakening the PDP from within, don't allow them. Make sure you are able to quickly give the Nigerian people a direction. What will really ginger all of us as citizens of this country right now would be when that candidate that we're all expecting is presented for this contest. Because honestly, that is the delay. In fact, even the issue of all of this chasing of the political parties and all of that by the ruling party is simply because we are still kind of dilly-dallying about who is going to be the candidate to be presented for the 2027 contest. That's what the challenge is.
You'd have to agree on who that candidate is.
Yes, and that is where we have a challenge.
The way that we're looking at things, it's going to be difficult for you lot to agree.
I hope we find a way around it.
Yeah, let me come to you, Prof. Just on the back of what he's saying, the ADC has been touted as the platform for this grand coalition, sort of alliance, opposition coalition. Do you think today's developments strengthen or undermine that possibility?
I think it has renewed their confidence. You know, it's a ground on which they can also build if they resolve outstanding matters that can still be very, very disturbing. Do not forget that it was ADC that took the initiative, rallied the opposition in Ibadan, last week, and that was a good step in the right direction of having a common, unified opposition. If to confront the incumbents, so that we can have a robust election next year. So I think they're starting well, or maybe they are midway anyway. They are making a good restart, depending on how they manage the ongoing crisis going forward. Remember again, only yesterday, the state congresses were nullified, the convention was sort of also nullified. These matters are not things that you can just sweep under the carpet. You can snowball once more. You can rear its head at any point in time. And there are so many court cases here and there. Those things can be very, very disturbing.
Indeed.
And of course, we do not know if some more will also come. I listened to Ibe Kachuku yesterday, and of course, he sounded very, very confident that ADC is not stable yet. But how can you resolve?
In other words, if you have a victory today, I'll muddy the waters.
And I don't see any reason, really. Charles, I don't see any reason.
So he's doing a yeoman's job.
I don't also see any reason why someone like Ube Kachuku cannot be approached. He's been on it since ADC came
but
on.
Hasn't he been approached?
He's a pretty civilized young man. So I would imagine that you can have a good conversation with him. I mean,
just on that, just for me to add, what I observe from Ibe Kachuku's end is this same position that I've taken, that we ought to be presenting who the Nigerian people believe in as the person to present for this contest. That is what I observe. Because if you listen to
said
Ibe
that
Kachuku,
just a minute ago. So why are you taking his time in order to say it again?
It's okay. It's just that I wanted to highlight that Ibe Kachuku is not necessarily difficult to reach out to.
Right.
But the establishment in the opposition end need to realize that we need to go with a winning
you have a point. Let me come to you, Baba Yusuf. What's the fundamental problem? I mean, here we are. He's talking about Ibe Kachuku. We're talking about, disputes and all kinds of things. I mean, is it a problem of leadership, a problem of structure, or a problem of political culture? What is it that makes it impossible for these guys to ever just sit down and agree things?
First of all, it's absolute greed for power.
Yeah.
The fact that the common denominator motivation. And I say it with utmost respect to them, but the truth is the truth, even though it's bitter, that it's actually not about the people of this country, Charles. It's about a political establishment that are always trying to sort out themselves. And I'll give you a very direct example. Almost all the current opposition political figures, I've said it before, are very, very, they are not ready to build a political structure or build a political party or sustain and maintain a political party for the purpose of coming into leadership over time. They do what I call pay-as-you-go politics. All of them are always waiting until it is 1 year or 2 years before election, and then they start selling these narratives of trying to come into office. Albeit now, they are up against a President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his group, who have mastered this art ab initio. They've been 25 years into opposition or more, and they have been able to position. Now, this late hour coming is what has led to this situation, and it is playing out in even how they are able to get another special purpose vehicle to run into the elections. As we are, even the Ibadan meeting that you are talking about and all other, you hear people also, the different groups are still talking in variance. They are not unified, and I think that is the issue they will continue to have. I learned with this. For President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the APC, like I said, unless we have a Nigeria, we will not have a political party. But more importantly, I will leave us with a quote by a famous Chinese military strategist, Sun Tzu, that says, build a golden gate for your enemies to retreat. The way it is now is not about the political figures. Millions and hundreds of millions of Nigerians, if anything, the 133 million multidimensionally poor, are looking for alternatives, and there's no doubt about it. If you continue to choke and frustrate the opposition figures, albeit they have their own issues they can fall on their sword, you run the risk of continue building sympathy for the opposition and pushing yourself into a corner to the extent that it will get to a point that people will backlash, and that is how the Arab Spring was triggered in Tunisia. Egypt followed, Libya followed, Yemen followed, Bahrain followed, and later Omar al-Bashir fell. This was a pro-democracy protest.
Right.
And I think it is good to allow the political space to be flat, but the opposition figures need to realize that if they will have a political future, they should put aside their differences and look at Nigeria with a view to bringing a credible candidate that will be acceptable to Nigerians, regardless of the zoning.
Hopefully, it won't get to that combustible stage.
We hope not, but we need to say it for people to know.
Charles, let me just quickly be correct. I said Ibe Kachiko earlier on. It's actually Dumebi Kachiko.
Ibe is his brother. His brother was a minister.
I didn't just say just to correct me. It's actually Dumebi Kachiko. I apologize.
That is why I called it a pro-democracy protest. We are not advocating for a revolution for violence. But you see, naturally, there are triggers that may come from the street that we may not control. Muhammad Bazouza, when he set himself ablaze in Tunisia, nobody knew what would be the outcome. And Zain al-Abidin went down in Tunisia without knowing he was going to go down. So it's a note for the political class that apart from the opposition figures, we have a combustible situation of citizens of this country that we cannot control their mind anymore.
I've got 2 minutes. I'll give the last word to you. What are the immediate next steps for both parties? Because, I mean, you've straddled both parties. And what should we be watching for in the coming days?
That activation of summits in Ibadan should be now, built. We should leverage on it. Because
actually, I'll give Prof the last word. So make yours brief.
The camp of the PDP, that is the Tamil Turaki SN camp and all that, that is in tandem with what the BOT has taken as a position now, should reach out and move, because both the ADC and the authentic PDP can work together. And if they can adopt that position they mentioned in Ibadan, that they are going to present one candidate, a consensus candidate, the earlier we do that now, the better.
Prof, we've got literally 10 seconds. After today, which party is in a better position heading into 2027, the PDP or the ADC?
The ADC.
Okay. On that very brief note, I want to thank you very much indeed, Professor